Congratulations! You have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Aaron Neuwirth was here the day Godzilla came to town, and he told us where he stands. And Dave Anderson was there with kittens everywhere. Tony Cogan was the one British fan. Then something went wrong for Matt Poirier and his phone. He was late to the movement draft jam, and at a rapid pace the Lambcast came from space, and this is how the podcast ran. Science fiction, pre-68 draft. The lambs and shepherd try to give each other the shaft. See podcasters fighting on the Lambcast. Everyone wants Aaron Neuwirth to come in the very last. At the late night double feature picture show.
Hey everyone, are you ready to rumble? We have a draft show and the choices are choice. So be prepared for some spirited preemptive selections and assorted cursing. Welcome to the Lambcast, where this week 4 of us will compete to create the ultimate slate of pre-1968 science fiction films. The heavens, once an object of superstition, awe, and fear, now a vast region for growing knowledge. The distance of Venus, the atmosphere of Mars, the size of Jupiter, and the speed of Mercury. All this and more we know, but the greatest mystery the heavens have kept a secret. What sort of life, if any, inhabits these other planets? Human life like ours, or life extremely lower in the scale, or dangerously higher? Seeking the answer to these timeless questions, forever seeking, is the constant preoccupation of scientists everywhere. Scientists famous and unknown. Scientists in great universities and in modest homes. Scientists of all ages. Let's meet the scientists that showed up for this week's show. Dave Anderson, Klaatu Barada Niktu to you.
I'm going to use my science for evil purposes today.
The Wicker Man podcast host Tony Cogan now knows what it feels like to be God. I can't believe that Aaron Neuwirth is the last of his species. If nuclear testing continues, then someday, somewhere in the world, another out there with Aaron and Abe may appear.
If you could be so lucky.
Our goal this week, folks, is to complete a slate of films that we think are the best or most interesting science fiction films from before 1967, or 1967 and earlier. I made the cutoff point in 1968 because that's the year that 2001 came out, and it seemed like it was a turning point in the kinds of science fiction films we were getting. And that'll make for an interesting draft to do later on. Somebody suggested the early science fiction films, and I thought that that would be a great idea. And I think a couple of people on this show have talked about their love for science fiction films in earlier times, so it seems natural that they wanted to be on the show this week. Those of you who are not familiar with the Lambcast draft format, we use a snake format. So the last pick in round 1 is the first pick in round 2. And that happens at both ends, so a couple of us get a chance to have back-to-back selections. Our draft order was determined before the show. Aaron is going to be first. Tony will be second. I will be picking third, and then Dave will be picking fourth. So, Aaron, it's round one. You get to pick first. What's your first pick?
All right. First off, Rich, what a lovely intro that you read there. That was really nice.
Thank you.
But I'm gonna go with for my first pick in this what I think is a very exciting draft. 1927's Metropolis from director Fritz Lang. Um, it's Metropolis. State rules. I'm a big fan of the various versions of this movie I've seen at this point. The production design is, I think, incredible. Just thinking about the sheer enormity of the scale for a movie like that and the innovation in mind as far as how to create a completely just fictionalized world at a time where we're just not getting stuff like that, at least certainly not on a frequent basis. And like obviously, it's Fritz Lang, so it's German expressionist, but like just the very specific kind of look it has, the perception of what a futuristic society would be involving the things that it does when it comes to this kind of underground society, along with the elite class and the technology and the way work occurs and whatnot. There's just so much. There's so much to just look at in awe, and then just admiring it from like a silent film standpoint, and seeing where the story takes things and what kind of inevitable themes pop up throughout this, and just how absorbing I find it to be. It's especially now, it's not a short movie, but it offers, I think, so much, just from like a visual standpoint alone, of course, but in terms of the variety of things it's trying to explore within this unique world, I just find pretty fantastic.
Well, it's awfully hard to fault you choosing, maybe the essential science fiction film of the first decade of real motion pictures. Not to disparage anything that came before 1920, but they're rarely thought of being full films. This is definitely a full film. How do you feel about the Giorgio Moroder score when it came out?
Is that the 80s thing or whatever?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I've ever actually seen it like in full. I've seen pieces of it over the year, but I can't think of it. I think I've ever like sat down to like watch the little thing with that. So I don't have much of it. It's more.
Oh, okay.
It's more like. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I take Metropolis as I get it, basically, and it's like I think there's so much there to look at where I'm just like, all right, we could play around with things, but I don't think I've ever sat down and watched that like particular version of it.
Well, I know that there are people out there who love Metropolis and hate it with the Moroder score, but I've seen it both ways, and I am fine with it both ways. So I think you've got a good pick here. Nobody's going to be squawking that you chose poorly on the first round. They may just be complaining that they don't get to choose it later on.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
Me as well. I watched it last night.
I'm sure.
I'm gonna be doing.
You watched it last night in hopes of being able to pick
I'm gonna be
it.
doing a lot of complaining, I think.
Okay, well that's okay. Complaining is part of what makes this fun. Tony, we're going to get something to complain about because I'm sure you'll pick something that other people want.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that I'm going to pick what people wanted, which I consider to be one of probably the classic sci-fi film of the 50s. I'm taking The Day the Earth Stood Still. And already I can tell a few people wanted that as well.
Yeah.
Sure
did. Good. Thank you. I kind of knew that was coming.
I got plenty of options.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the people who was first introduced to this through the Scott Derrickson, Keanu Reeves remake of it, and I enjoyed the remake when I first watched it, but then going back and watching the original, and really, it's one of the things where it works so much better with the Cold War mentality in mind, this fear of aggression and the constant fear of destruction at all times, and that just constant on life itself, it gives The Day the Earth Stood Still a great level of relevance and importance that I don't think the remake had. Just the iconography of the original, it's just very hard to replicate. This image of Gort in it is just this I think alongside Robot Maria in Metropolis, this is when you think of the classic sci-fi robots, Gort is one of the ones that immediately comes to mind. But I think the main reason why I think it works so well is Michael Rennie as Klaatu. His performance is really what anchors the whole film together. It's like a brilliant piece of work, and it's just that like again, it's Keanu Reeves goes too far with the emotional detachment type of in the remake, but like when he gets the balance of all the emotions for Klaatu right, and just like just all the iconography, just the stuff in the script going in is getting seen in other films throughout the decades, like see in Army of Darkness, for example. Well, and it's just the like what's the classic of the 50s, and I know I've annoyed a few people by picking it.
You know who doesn't like the Day the Earth Stood Still remake? Director Scott Derrickson.
Yeah.
Because he had a tough time with the studio making that movie. And he was not
I didn't hate the remake. I mean, if you're going to remake something, don't do a carbon copy. I mean, they did do something a little bit different with it. It wasn't terrible. It didn't hold a candle to the original.
I thought the casting was great. I thought that was great choices casting-wise. I was very underwhelmed by the choices made in the movie, but Keanu made a lot of sense to me.
In the original one, I saw it as a kid, and I enjoyed it as a pure science fiction movie, and it was fun. And, later on in life, I read a lot of essays and analysis about it, comparing Klaatu to, Jesus Christ and all the imagery that entails. And now when I watch it, I can't unsee some of those allusions to Jesus Christ related to that character.
Well, when you first watched the film, if you hadn't read anything about it, I think you'd say this is a fantastic science fiction film. But once you start digging into it and thinking about it, it is a lot deeper, and it does have some interesting significance for the world that we live in. It would be nice if we could all just get along, but that pipe, as long as we don't extend it to the universe, they're happy to have it. Let us fight it out ourselves, which is, kind of what we're doing here. So. This was on the list for me as well. I've never seen the remake, so I can't make any comparison on that. I avoided it. I just said that doesn't make any sense to me.
It's surprisingly not bad.
I think we have a division of opinion on that one.
It's functional. That's what I'll say.
That's a good adjective.
I think the stuff with Keanu is functional. There's also 50 other minutes that don't involve Keanu in that movie that I'm not a fan.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like the stuff with Jaden Smith, and I wasn't really a fan of the stuff with Jennifer Connelly as well. That kind of it didn't quite work for me.
There's a goofy Richard Brake as a military guy thing going on that I think is off. It's so bad that I think you guys are forgetting that exists in that movie. That's how bad I think that movie is.
Well, we won't be talking about the Keanu Reeves movie. We'll be remembering the Robert Wise version with Michael Rennie, because he was there the day the earth stood still. And I know where he stands.
Tuesday,
it's okay. Well, I'm happy in the sense that my top choice is now available to me, although obviously later choices are being taken away as we go along. But it's nice when you get your first choice, and I'm going to choose as my first film Forbidden Planet.
Well, thank you. That was my first choice too.
Well, Forbidden Planet. You kind of had to do Forbidden Planet next.
It's one of those things where when we're talking about these films, there's going to be some overlap between horror films and science fiction films. And this has a small horror element in it, but it's clearly a science fiction film. It's set on another planet. There's an alternative world that's been set up. We're learning about an alien civilization that has disappeared, but we have human conflict that's involved in it. And when we're talking about iconic figures, I agree Maria and Klaatu are iconic figures from science fiction, but don't forget Robbie the Robot. And he is introduced here in Forbidden Planet, and he can produce whiskey, so I think that that's probably something that gives him an advantage over the other mechanical icons of this draft so far.
That movie gave me nightmares as a kid, the id monster.
That's exactly what I remembered from the movie. Is the monster from the id, and when that score and the sound effect was awesome. And that sequence where the id shows up trying to invade the spaceship's camp, so to speak, is horrifying. And then later on, when it's on the other side of the door coming through, and
a lot of it, pal, is that first is like seeing the invisible nature of it, and when you get the animation used for it, that's like the monster lit up by all the ray guns. It's like a beautifully creepy bit of animation, and
it is.
Yeah, I'm glad.
And when Morbius realizes that it's his own id that's coming for him, that's just perfect.
I'm glad you brought up the score. I bought, a few years ago, I bought that on vinyl, and I used to have a record player in my classroom when I was teaching, and I would play that in the background, and God, my kids would come in going, "What the hell is that?" It's a really strange. I think it's the first all electronic music score for a film. I don't know for sure.
It might well be.
There's a lot of great movie posters from these eras, obviously. When movie posters were really alive and whatnot. But I feel like Forbidden Planet is like one of the best like lunchbox movies, if you know what I mean, in terms of just like that kind of horizontal one sheet put into a lunchbox with the robot and everything. It's like that. Like I'm not a big lunchbox guy, but in terms of like that kind of art in that kind of like retro item, I think that's pretty perfect.
Yeah, I've got the one sheet on my wall.
Oh, that's cool.
I think also as well, like talking about Forbidden Planet, like the production design and the colours as well. Like the previous ones have both been black and white. It's like you get full like 50s Technicolor, and it's still. And I watched this is the one I watched a few days ago in preparation for this draft, and on Sunny HD, it still looks beautiful today.
Sure, colors.
We're joined at the last minute by Matthew Poirier, who's going to graciously take the next spot in the draft selection, even though he barely knew what we were doing here at the last. Matthew, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. And as we say, Klaatu Niktu Barada to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
I know we're throwing you into the fire here quickly, and just to remind everybody where we are at this point, Aaron picked Metropolis, Tony picked The Day the Earth Stood Still, I picked Forbidden Planet. Matthew, what pre-1968 science fiction film are you going to choose?
I'm going to go with Catwomen of the Moon from 1953. It's barely a feature film, feature length. It's like an hour and 4 minutes, but I saw it on Tubi a little while ago, and I absolutely loved it. So it's definitely one of my favorite from that time period.
What a bold first choice.
It feels like it. It feels like one of those films that you would choose because of the format of your show. Something that's, it wasn't direct to video in what was the year it came out? 1953, but it could easily be if it was coming out today.
Yes. I do kind of feel like back when like my favorite football team, which is probably going to cause animosity because nobody really likes them, but the Patriots selecting players well before they should be drafted. I probably could have let this one sit on the board maybe a little bit longer, but I don't know if anybody else was going to grab it. But, but yeah,
Dave's pissed, I'm sure.
Yeah. That was number one. Thank God for you, Matthew.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I always enjoy this one.
Well, it sounds fun. I haven't seen it that I can recall, although I have heard of it. Has anybody else seen this one?
I'm not seen it.
I've seen the title before, but I haven't seen the movie.
Well, Dave, it's in your realm. Catwomen of the Moon.
I don't know if I could talk that one.
You're a cat guy.
Yeah, I'm surprised I haven't seen it. Okay.
All right. It's your turn, Dave.
My first pick is one of Walt Disney's first live-action films, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Ooh.
Directed by Richard Fleischer, starring Kirk Douglas, James Mason, Paul Lucas, Peter Lorre. It's also one of Disney's darkest films, I think. I don't think they've made one quite as complex before or since, as far as their family-oriented movies go that are released under the Disney banner. There are some of the cornier bits, like the Whale of a Tale song and that silly seal. But to me, uh, Jules Verne's Captain Nemo character is one of the neatest characters ever created for literature, and at the very least, one of the greatest anti-heroes. And I don't think anyone's ever portrayed him on the screen better than James Mason. Um, I also think this is one of Mason's best performances of his career. He finds, a perfect balance between torture genius and madman. And like so many great movie villains, part of us does identify and sympathize with the guy, even if we don't always condone his actions. Um, this movie has so many iconic moments. Of course, there's the giant squid attack, but the stuff that got to me were the special effects when the Nautilus rams other warships. Those effects are still convincing even today. I just recently watched this about a month ago, and most aspects of the movies technically have really held up well. Um, the submarine itself is iconic. I used to recreate that thing with my Legos all the time. Um, it's a fun movie that goes in some dark places, uh, and for a Disney movie, it does end on a pretty somber note. Um, but yeah, it's one of the studio's best films they've ever made.
I really like this movie a lot, and I mean, this is a compliment. I'd love to see a new take on. I think there's so much rife with potential to make a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea today, just to see what we do. I know Brad Pitt and David Fincher were doing that for like the longest of times.
And wasn't there a TV series that came out fairly recently?
There wasn't I don't know, recently. There's something that came out.
There's been a few TV versions that I thought were terrible, and yeah, I agree. The Brad Pitt David Fincher one is just a lost opportunity. When I first heard about that, I just thought that's going to be good.
I do admire that it has the jauntiness in there too. Like for being like you're saying, like being a dark movie, you do also have like Kirk Douglas pulling out his squeeze box and like doing little jumps.
I mean, how many times did they play Whale of a Tale in the film?
Yeah. All right, that scene's cringeworthy, and I usually fast forward through that. It's just out of place with the tone of the rest of the film. But other than that, it's great steampunkish sci-fi.
When I think of the son of an Indian Raja, I think James Mason. So it all works out.
I do have to say I like the fact that I can date myself and show you how old I am. One of the first things I can recall from my first visit to Disneyland was seeing the set of the Nautilus. Cool. Yeah. They had it. I don't know how long it was there. I know it was probably done well before 1965. I don't think they had it after that, but you could actually walk into the set and see, there's the organ and the saloon, and it just is gorgeous, and music would be playing, and it was like fantastic. And so, and the whole Nautilus, I think, is a terrific, like you said, steampunk invention that looks just amazing on screen. And when it's coming underwater, it does look like a sea monster. I could understand why sailors would be frightened of it.
I remember the Disney submarine ride was also themed after this.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at the Disneyland stuff, check out the YouTube channel Defunct Lands, which has done a few videos on somebody voyage, and has done they got a VR recreation of the Nautilus set and the rides, which is a really interesting thing to look at.
All right, Dave, we're starting round 2, and we go backwards, so you get the first pick in round 2.
Okay.
What have you got?
My next pick is The War of the Worlds from 1953.
Son of a bitch.
I'm glad someone else is saying that today besides me. Starring Gene Barry and Ann Robinson, and of course the great Les Tremayne, who does a lot of these things, or did a lot of these things back then. It's still the quintessential alien invasion movie. Certainly one of the most influential. I wasn't around when it was released in '53, but I did get to, I first saw it on a TV, on an old black and white handed down to me. But I did get the opportunity to see it in a theater in 1977 because it was released as a double feature with When Worlds Collide during the height of Star Wars mania, and it's a different animal on the big screen. It really felt bigger than it really was, and even though it's a fairly quaint film, it didn't have a huge budget, but it looks like a big film, and that's what's really cool about it. Along with Star Trek reruns, this was my first exposure to pure science fiction, and it left a big impression. The scenes of mass destructions are infinitely more impressive on a big screen if you get a chance. And Criterion came out with a version of it on Blu-ray that's also really good. And the story is pretty tension-filled throughout, at least until the ending, when the Martians simply die because they're not immune to common pathogens. But in George Pal's defense, that's how the novel ended too. I think my favorite scene now is the scene where Father Collins gets blasted by the aliens. Part of that could be due to my current overall distrust of a lot of organized religions, but part of that is fueled by evangelicals who, spout what they spout. And Collins' fatally boneheaded decision to reach out to the Martians with only a Bible in his hand and claiming if they're more advanced than us, then they should be nearer the Creator for that reason. Oh, he couldn't be more hilariously wrong. And I just think that's a great scene.
I love the color in this film, and I got the Criterion Blue to review, which I was excited about because I hadn't seen it in forever, and I only had a vague memory of it. And then the Spielberg version kind of like washed a lot of it away. So while catching up with it again, I like this movie a lot. And then Paramount's like, oh yeah, Criterion, here's the 4K version.
It's like, the 4K version is amazing.
It is. The color is so great to look at in this movie. So I love like 50s sci-fi that has color like that, where it's just like in your face and impressive.
I did get to a theatrical screening a couple of years ago at the TCM Film Festival, and one of the best things at that festival are the presentations by Craig Barron and Ben Burt. Craig Barron, multiple Academy Award-winning special effects guy, and Ben Burt, the same thing. And they always, go extensively into the background of the technical elements of the film. And they had a lot of stuff about War of the Worlds that was really interesting. And they had some extensive footage. There is when one of the war machines catches fire in the shot where they're attacking, I guess it's City Hall in Los Angeles. The fire was an accident. The squib actually accidentally set the war machine on fire, and so when it appears in the film, that's just one, a happy coincidence that they had. Yeah. So that was a little bit of an extra. And at the screening that I went to, we got a little bit of bonus because co-star Ann Robinson was there.
Oh, nice.
So it was nice, and everybody, the movie looks great. Like you said, it's on the big screen. It's even better. Matthew, we're back around to you, so you get to choose your second film. What are you up for?
So this one is kind of veering on the horror side, but still sci-fi, I think. Creature from the Black Lagoon.
All right.
So yeah, this is one I remember, first time seeing it with my dad. I was on TV, the movie or Channel 38 in Boston, that we got in Maine growing up. And it was one of those ones that, it kind of taught me to have fun. It was one of those things where we were kind of joking around about seeing the Creature from the Black Lagoon swimming around and all of that. But yeah, I always love this one. So so this is my next choice there. But I whenever it's on TV, I always enjoy watching it. It's one of my favorites.
There's few shots I think they're as iconic for like mid-century sci-fi fantasy than the creature under the water underneath her.
Oh yeah. No, it's a great looking movie, and that's him swimming under her as she's swimming is like creepiness. It's like Jaws before you knew what was going on. Again, I'm an old movie weirdo, so I was at the TCM Film Festival a few years ago, and they showed it in 3D.
Ooh.
So that was a lot of fun also. And it looked great, and the movie is a lot of fun. I have a little. we were talking earlier about whether or not it's a horror film, science fiction film. Do creature features count? I'm willing to give Matthew the benefit of the doubt on this since he just got dumped into the show. So I don't want to argue against it, although I do think there's a little bit of question as to whether or not it is science fiction or straight horror.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm not going to argue against you on
Well,
this.
I was going based off IMDb, which I know from my experience when it comes to tagging stars for movies, that IMDb is not always the best, most reliable. But they listed it as horror sci-fi. I was like, okay, well, if IMDb says it, maybe I'll go with it. But yeah, that's not always the best rule, right? With that,
it is about a bunch of scientists researching this area.
Yes,
that's my logic for this. I was able to pick it.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I've always wanted to see this one on the big screen. I think the closest has been like on kind of more modern TV sets, but I've never had a chance to see it on the big screen.
Yeah, it's nice. Sometimes there are bits and pieces that are a little old-fashioned and creaky, and there are some pretty sexist sensibilities to it, but none of that takes away from the story, and it's still a lot of fun.
But you prefer The Creature Walks Among Us, right? That's your preferred version.
I don't have a preferred version. I like The Creature from the Black Lagoon in 3D. How do you beat that?
You just told me. You said you like the third one the best. That's classic Rich. That's what I've heard.
All right. It's my third choice. No, it's only second choice.
Yeah.
Geez, I'm counting ahead. I'm jumping ahead.
That was your third choice.
Yes.
The rest ones.
I'm going to go with The Time Machine from 1960.
Good choice.
Another one of those films that ends up looking really solid. It's got the special effects are basically just fast photography. It's clever, where they show the sequence where he's going through time up ahead in the first century that he goes through before the Earth gets covered by atomic warfare, and it's funny watching the window across the street. The dresses go up and down, and the fashions change. I thought that was a clever idea. And we were talking about some of these things that induce nightmares before, like in The Day the Earth Stood Still, or in the Creature from the Id and Forbidden Planet. I think the Morlocks in The Time Machine are going to do the same thing for a lot of kids. Give you the heebie-jeebies, because those blue, greenish creatures with the glowing eyes and the white hair in the dark, that should give you nightmares and make you freak out. And I thought Rod Taylor was great in it, and what's her name? She's fine.
Is that Mew? He didn't have to do much but look pretty.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. There's not a lot to that, but the machine itself is also fantastic. It looks terrific, and it would be fun to have that sitting in the house right now, down in the living room.
Treasure lounge chair.
That's it. I could sit there and watch the TV from that. Another one where the production design adds to the value of the film. Tony, what have you got for your second choice?
So like we've obviously going for a bit more of the mix of the horror and the sci-fi. The next one I'm going to take is Bride of Frankenstein.
Nice.
And it was debating to me for which one I go for, whether it's Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein. But thinking back on them and thinking like more, Bride of Frankenstein is the one I prefer. Well, I think some of it may just be because of like. This one I have a bit more recent memories of. Literally, a few years ago, I've mentioned this festival on the podcast before, the Forbidden Worlds Film Festival in Bristol, at the Bristol Aquarium IMAX. Their one a few years ago, they showed Bride of Frankenstein in IMAX, which was an incredible thing to see on like all the sort of, like classic designs on a screen that big. Well, it's a great like mix of the gothic. The charm of the original story, then you get the more weird sci-fi stuff, especially when you get the Dr. Pretorius side of it. You get like some more of the original bits of from the Frankenstein book. Like you get the scene with the blind hermit, which was brilliantly parodied in Young Frankenstein with Gene Hackman playing the hermit. But I think then a lot of it you get is the actual performances from the Frankenstein monster and the bride. Like Boris Karloff was like great, powerful, intimidating presence in the first one, but his work here is just excellent, giving more like emotional depth to the monster, and you have more just some dialogue and that stuff at the ending was about the long dead bit. It's a really brilliant performance, and considering how little of the film Elsa Lanchester is in as the bride, it's just how iconic a character she made with very limited screen time. Like loads of like designs you can see references in other media. I mean, a lot of Tim Burton you can take from Bride of Frankenstein, and yeah, it's just really like great like sci-fi film. And of like the classic Frankenstein films, this is the one that is my favorite.
I mean, there's an argument to make that it's the best sequel of all time. We talked about it recently on our podcast, and my new favorite part is when the monster is so angry at the bride that he pulls the lever in the lab that is Frankenstein height, of course, so he can only he can reach it. And of course, for Dr. Frankenstein was like, I definitely need to design an emergency self-destruct button that can only be reached by my monster.
Well, you wouldn't design an emergency self-destruct button that you could set off accidentally.
I wish there was a tiny stool next to it so you could like justify it a little bit more.
Well, the movie is iconic, as you've said, and I think that everybody knows that that it is really one of the best sequels to a film that has ever been made. We talked about it, I think, on the we had a horror draft back in October, and I think this might have been one of the first round choices, yes. And everybody seemed very enthusiastic about it at the time. I'm trying to remember what everybody said. I'll try and put a link in the notes.
I think I remember a few years ago did a horror sequel draft. I think this was the first round pick in that one.
That was it. That was all. I think I was on that episode.
Very good. And just to brag a little bit again, I've seen it on the big screen twice in the last 4 years.
Okay.
Which is great. Good place to see it.
Definitely agree with that.
Aaron, you've got the double pick here. What's your
I forgot to get two. Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
Oh, well, first off, obviously, let's get Godzilla off the board then.
It was a question of when, not if you take it.
I mean, again, there's at least like 6 movies I could choose, so it's fine, but still.
I'm assuming you're choosing the 1954.
1954 is Ishiro Honda's original Godzilla. What else can I say about Godzilla? I'm a very big fan of the entire franchise, so the idea of putting Godzilla in a draft is, obviously great for me. It's Godzilla. It's iconic in so many different ways, whether it's the design of Godzilla, the nuclear threat that it presents, or the allegory it's going for, or the score by Akira Ifukube, the various set pieces that at the time were certainly very, very effective. And I've kept thinking about this, as the more and more I've become engrossed in Godzilla lore. I just think about, sure, on an entertainment level, for like an American audience, a non-Japanese audience, there's something there because it's like a giant monster in a suit, no less. But what I think about now is, what is it like for like Japanese audiences that made this movie a hit to watch this film that's about a giant nuclear monster destroying parts of their country? Like, that has to be a trip for them to be like, this is insane, and yet I want to see this movie again and again. Like, that's just, and I want to make this a 35 plus ongoing franchise. Obviously the metaphor is lost at that, or at least for the most part is lost at that point. But like in 1954, it must be wild to be like, this exists. Like, we're making this movie that's very much tied to our history. But yeah, it's Godzilla. It's especially this first one, which is such a somber presentation of what happens in this new age that we're in, nuclear war and possibilities and what have you. And plus, it's just Godzilla. It's cool. It's a cool monster. So there you go.
I heard a rumor that there's a podcast that might be focused on the issue of Godzilla in the not too distant future.
There's certainly some things and plugs I want to talk about, let me tell you.
All right. Well, round 3, Aaron, you are on the book again. So what do you got here?
Okay, well, I forgot that I get the second. Yeah, all right, let's see. My pick of the litter. I'm gonna go with. Actually, I'll go with this because I literally watched it for this podcast. I'm gonna go jump up a few decades, or one decade at least, from Godzilla, and go with John Frankenheimer's Seconds.
Ah, God damn it!
I had seen this movie a while ago, and I was a big fan of it, and I hadn't watched it since. However, that said, I had a very striking memory of it because for a 1966 black and white sci-fi, I was impressed with how far it goes as far as its like, I don't want to say graphicness, but it's certainly like very in your face about what it's doing. You get a plastic surgery scene with the Rock Hudson character getting work done to change his identity essentially. You have what amounts to like orgy type sequences with a lot of naked bodies in a black and white 66 film where I'm like, I don't normally see all this as much detail as this movie is giving me, especially for a movie, from like a real director and real cast and everybody. But beyond like just the tawdriness of it all, it's a really compelling story about this man who, has unfulfilled of his life, just like changes his whole thing and becomes Rock Hudson. And I love the kind of, being younger. I didn't grow up with Rock Hudson, so like just knowing about him and watching a movie like this where it explores, this man who has a kind of secret identity and knowing a lot about Rock Hudson, it's like, this is fascinating to watch this actor later in his career take on this kind of movie that obviously has areas that at least hint towards what he's going through in his own life in various ways. Certainly not to like the same degrees that Seconds takes things, but I mean, there's something there that's beyond just, actor wanting to do something interesting. And this is what Frankenheimer in the 60s, so this is like prime Frankenheimer time. Like we're after Manchurian at this point. We're like right before like what the train, or no, we're after the train. We're before Grand Prix. So it's like he's just, I think, on a roll at this, like 7 Days of Maze before that too. So like his ability, I think, is just really at a height for him as a director. And the movie looks gorgeous. I mean, it's a 66 film, but it's in black and white. I think the cinematography was like the one thing that got the most praise at the time, and it's deservedly so, because it's very much in the kind of paranoid Cold War era type filmmaking, yet it's applied to this psychological horror film as opposed to being like, Red Scare type stuff or what have you. So The Seconds, I think, is a fascinating movie. I really like this one a lot.
And John Frankenheimer is a director I've always liked, and Seconds is one of his best movies.
For sure.
But I thought Rock Hudson was a revelation, and, his performance in this is unlike anything he'd done before or since. And, he probably did bring something personal to the role.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you mentioned that, and, I've never made that connection when I've watched it, and I've watched it several times. But that final act, I'm not going to provide.
I was just going to say, the thing I remember most about the film is that you only get one do-over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That final act, without providing spoilers, because I don't think there's a statute of limitation on spoilers, especially for obscure movies.
Mm-hmm.
His performance is just unnerving.
Yeah.
That just gave me chills. Still does.
Yeah, it's, again, like I saw it, Jesus, I don't know, 15 years ago or something for the first time. And it struck me how far it kind of goes for a time that, it's not like the horror 80s, it's not a splatter fest. No, I'm not saying this one is, but it certainly has more going on than I would have expected to see for a film like this.
All right, we're going from Rock Hudson remaking himself to Tony choosing for the third round.
Yeah,
Great segue, Rich.
And I think tonally and probably quality-wise, it couldn't get more different. But in terms of sheer entertainment value, like all the classic sci-fi films, it's a terrible film, but I have a blast with Plan 9 from Outer Space.
All right.
That was my number 3 too as well. So I probably shouldn't have done Catwoman from the Moon. That was a little early on that one. So.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the classic, probably the classic bad film. Like I first watched it when I was at university with a big group of people, all of us having an absolute blast, laughing along with it, which no part of the film works, but that's exactly why it works. Ed Wood, you can see why he's got the reputation as being the worst director to have ever gone behind the camera. But he's put all of his considerable efforts into Plan 9 from Outer Space. Doesn't pay off, but you can see that he's a heart behind Plan 9 from Outer Space that's present throughout it all. There's this great scrappiness that you get to it. Like, it's a bit bittersweet that this is like the last moments. Well, yeah, if you go in with the right frame of mind, you can have a great bit of fun with it. And they also get a bit of new appreciation for it. Don't really know exactly how accurate it is to real life, but watching, I'll mention him again, Tim Burton's Ed Wood, and then go back to watch Plan 9 from Outer Space, it does give it a bit more like of a weight to it. It's a bit more of a heartfelt quality to it. I mean, probably granted, the scene of Ed Wood in drag, meeting Orson Welles was complete fiction, but there is that sense of optimism that you get from that scene and Wood as a whole that helps, that leaches on into watching other Ed Wood's films and really comes playing with Plan 9 from Outer Space.
It has so much personality. Like, I can't say the same about like some of the huge budget movies I see today. That gives it an edge on its own already. As far if you like you said, if you're in the right state of mind, like, it's not quote unquote good, but it has effort going in. It's not a good
film, but it is a good time.
It has effort going in from the people involved making it. Like, it doesn't feel. It's not like Ed Wood's like phoning it in. Like, he's trying.
And so many low-budget filmmakers today talk about being inspired by that film, not so much because of how good or bad it is, but there's almost a sense of like Ed Wood just put himself out there. And so, for so many of these low-budget film directors, it's not about being able to be the next Stanley Kubrick. It's almost like, can I just get my movie out there? And if I get bad reviews, if people, kill it, if it doesn't turn out the way I want it to, at least I did it. And so I don't think I would have a site if it wasn't for Ed Wood and Plan 9 for Outer Space. So for sure.
Don't want to be the guy who's always looking for the personal angle on this, but my dad was in business with Ed Wood. My dad was a professional magician, and he did spook shows, and they did Ed Wood films at the spook shows.
Your dad was Criswell?
Plan 9. No, but he knew Criswell.
All right.
And Vampira and some of those other folks like that in the Hollywood era at that time. And at one point, he was listed in the credits for Plan 9 from Outer Space. There's another Kirkham listed there, Willard Kirkham, who's a different person. But if you ever see the listing for Kirk Kirkham, it was basically just I think a credit that was given because he had an interest in the damn movie.
Okay.
It's kind of like
but it was not a financial interest, because I know my father didn't have any money.
Kind of like the special thanks credits, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. All right, but Plan 9 from Outer Space is notorious, and of course the Johnny Depp movie, the Tim Burton version of that, was excellent. And it shows exactly the kind of enthusiasm that somebody was just mentioning, that it's about, I got to get something out there, and even if you know that it's not the greatest thing in the world, even if you think it's the greatest thing in the world and it's not, you're doing something, and a lot of people never get that far.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's something to be said for that. But we've said it, so that's as far as we need to go about that. It's my turn, and I'm looking at my list of choices, and I'm enthusiastic about the next two that I have to choose between them. Damn it! I'm going to go with Robinson Crusoe on Mars.
That's a good one.
Which was a childhood favorite of mine. It was one that I saw when I was a kid, when it was new, and I just think it's an interesting take on the whole Robinson Crusoe idea, and the idea that astronauts traveling to Mars could survive on the oxygen level that's there if they trick it out a little bit. I thought that was kind of funny and interesting. Looking at it in retrospect, it's probably not all that practical, but who knows? When we get to Mars and start colonizing it, maybe somebody will figure out a way to do exactly that kind of thing.
That's a fun movie.
And the idea that there's a culture there that exists. We don't really see the aliens that are pursuing Friday. I don't even remember they call him Friday. Do they call him Friday in the movie?
I
Yes.
don't remember.
No, they do. It's Victor Ludley. He's plays Red.
All right.
You know,
And I know he's being pursued as an escaped slave, and we never see that, but the spaceship flying, speeding over the surface of Mars and seeking out the main character in Friday, I thought that was kind of scary too, without even having a big special effect to go along with it. And it's a good looking movie too.
Yeah.
considering the budget, yeah, the special effects are pretty imaginative. If I remember correctly, I think the alien ships were the same ones that were used as the war machines in the War of the Worlds, or a variation of it. They look the same anyway.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. They don't have the neck on them,
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't think. All right, Matthew, you don't have Plan 9 from Outer Space to choose. You got to find something else that would fit in that direct-to-video category.
Well, yeah, so I'm going outside of direct-to-video here for this one. I'm going to go indie film. Jean-Luc Godard's Alphaville.
Ooh.
So I'm always a big fan of Godard as well. So I guess I kind of straddle both sides of it, though Godard does have some DTV sensibilities, even if he's making indie art house films. But I love Eddie Constantine's sort of his hard-boiled detective character. Of course, Anna Karina, always love her in Godard's films as well. But that mix of like the hard-boiled detective combined with this futuristic thing, and of course Godard's sensibilities, all those things together kind of just make this one. It's one of my favorites of his as well.
I haven't seen it in a minute, but they had a new 4K come out from Kino that I have, and it's just sitting on my table. One of the many films that I'm just waiting to watch when I get a chance.
It's on my list of shame.
Blind spot for me.
I've not seen it. I'm ashamed to say.
Yeah, I think did Criterion release it?
No, Kino just released it on 4K.
Recently, yeah. I was trying to remember. I saw it about 15 years ago, and I thought I may have rented it from Netflix or whatever. When you get your discs, right? You get the. I guess I didn't rent them, but I want to say it was the Criterion, but maybe not. I thought they had almost all of his movies originally. And I can't remember if that was the version that I saw, because it had extras and things like that on it. But this one's one of my favorites. I'll have to check out the Kino version for sure.
Oh, you're right. There's a DVD. Yeah, it's an old DVD for Alphaville. Yeah.
That makes sense, because that would have been
before
Blu-ray, I think, when I saw it. Yeah, when I saw that version. Yeah.
And it's out of print, so if you have one, go to eBay. Get that money.
I don't think I have as many Godards. I think I have like Band of Outsiders. Fellini. I've got all of Fellini's Criterion ones. I don't know if he had a sci-fi movie. Now that I think about it, I don't think he didn't have a pre-60s sci-fi one at least, so or pre-68 one. So
let's just call 8.5 sci-fi. We can do that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I don't think I could stretch my coming in late that far. I don't know if that.
I'm not sure we give him the grace on that one.
You want to make that argument?
Right.
For 8.5 on your draft list.
Yes. Right. It's yeah. Right. Yeah. I don't even know where I would start the argument with that. So that's probably good that I went with Alphaville. Yeah.
Well, Dave, what are you going to make an argument for in round 3?
Okay. I'm going to make an argument for 1951's The Thing from Another World, starring Kenneth Tobey, who I always thought was an underrated character actor, and he did a lot of creature features back then. This movie, of course, has been historically overshadowed by the John Carpenter remake, but the original remains one of the better, more intelligent examples of post-war sci-fi horror. The movie does take significant liberties with the original story. Who goes there? Most notably, its depiction of the creature, played by James Arness. It's probably due to budgetary restraints. It more resembles Frankenstein's monster than a shape-shifting life form, and is even described as in the film as being similar to a vegetable. And what I liked is they beat the audience to the punch. One character makes an offhanded comment about the ridiculousness of an intellectual carrot. So yeah, it's not Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, but it's a smart story, and the believable characters keep us from laughing our asses off, I think. Like Carpenter's film, this one makes the most of its intimate, claustrophobic setting. set in the Arctic this time, and it does a great job creating tension by offering only sparing glances at the creature. It's a low budget film, but it's extremely well made, and narratively, I think it holds up pretty well.
It's
Problem is, I can't denigrate anybody's choices and suggest that their list is foolish because they all have things on them that I was going to pick.
I just want to point out that I love the title "Who Goes There." I think that's such a cool title for a story like this.
I liked it too.
All right, Dave, you get the wraparound.
Oh, cool. Okay, my next one. All right, I'm going to go with The Fly from 1958.
Nice.
This is another classic overshadowed by an 80s remake. This one's obviously a lot quainter in comparison, mostly because of its technical aspects. But for its time, it had a lot of disturbing elements. The basic story has a scientist played by David Hedison trying to perfect a device that can transport objects from one place to another. He eventually tests it on himself, which, of course,
goes completely right, and everybody's happy. The end.
Yeah. It was a very short movie. I was kind of disappointed. Wow, it's all hunky dory. Wow. Anyway, now he has the head of a fly, and while his head is now part of a fly buzzing around the house, with his wife desperate to find him. Meanwhile, the character, his name's Andre, his human characteristics begin to fade as the fly's more primitive instincts take over. And all of this leads to that famous scene here where the fly with Andre's screaming face is trapped in a spider's web. Mm-hmm. And the special effects in that scene are kind of silly today, I guess. But his screams are still really, really nerve-wrangling, I guess. Not wrangling, nerve-jangling. Yeah. I mean, that line is being kind of part of culture, It's a good movie for its budget. It's got a few scenes that are actually kind of gross for the time. It's a fun movie. It doesn't hold a candle to the remake as far as intensity goes or performances. But anyone who grew up with the 86 version of The Fly, I think would enjoy going back and seeing the original inspiration for that film.
Plus, you get some Vincent Price.
Yeah.
Who doesn't do a whole lot in this movie.
No, he's not really a big part
of
the film.
When I was young, I hadn't seen The Fly until I was older, and so I always just knew about The Fly, and I was always thinking, oh, so that's the Vincent Price version. So I just assumed that he was The Fly, and then I finally saw it, I was like, oh, that's not the case at all. It's just like another guy in this movie. All right. But I do like The Fly. Like I grew up with Cronenberg's movie because I'm a wonderful child at that age. But watching the original version, I like that it's different. I like that Cronenberg's had different ideas of how to do this. Although it'd be curious to see Jeff Goldblum's small head on a tiny fly. But no, this original one is a trip to watch. And it makes me respect the Simpsons horror special that they do on The Fly all the more because they emulate the original one as well.
All right, Matthew, you're going to swat away The Fly and put in something that you think is worthy.
Yes, we're going to go back to kind of more along the lines of direct-to-video here. And I hope I don't hurt Aaron's sensibility since he picked a Godzilla film. But I'm going to go with Gamera versus Gyaos from 1967.
I'll allow it.
Okay, the reason why it's my favorite of the Gamera ones, of course, I also watched Mystery Science Theater 3000, and it was one of my favorite episodes that they did, especially when the Joel and the bots are making their own Gyaos. Then Crow gets a timeout for talking about mucilage or something, whatever, because I think he was smelling the mucilage or something, and he ends up getting a timeout as a result. Also, I think just, I'm always a fan of turtles, so that's part of the reason why I like Gamera, but I also kind of like that sort of the dead-eyed look that both Gyaos and Gamera have, and just whenever for example, my wife, when she picks up one of our cats and they're just not in the mood to be picked up and they have that look on their face, I just see Gyaos every time. And so all those things kind of make me I just get a kick out of it. But I always love the Gamera concept, I think, from a direct-to-video. So somebody who enjoys direct-to-video movies, it's like Gamera is almost sort of, he's that, the off-brand, or as the kids would say now, the Temu version of Godzilla maybe. But, I always appreciate that, thinking to myself as a kid when, going to the dollar store or something and seeing the off-brand version of Marvel superheroes or whatever. Gamera kind of fits that bill for me.
That is among the better ones in the Showa era of Gamera movies for sure.
Does the turtle fly in that one? I don't remember.
I assume so. It's the third or fourth one, right? So he's flying at that point.
Yeah, so he flies because that's how he can attack. Because Gauss is a pterodactyl of some sort. So yeah, he does. He's the image on the cover, of course, has him. Like he's got like rockets where his feet are supposed to be.
But that's all turtles do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
So this film my camera does the gymnastics vault.
Oh, is that the one? You might be right. That's a good one.
I think it might be.
It's been a while since I've seen it. That's right. Yeah, where he's kind of swinging on the thing and then he. Yeah.
One thing's for sure, he's a friend to all children.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, for my next choice, we are going to get a return to a character that's been mentioned earlier, and I can't disagree that James Mason is the best Captain Nemo, but I think Herbert Lom's pretty good Captain Nemo, and I'm going to pick Mysterious Island from 1961, which has a fantastic Bernard Herrmann score, and it also features work from Ray Harryhausen, and I can't imagine having a science fiction draft without a Harryhausen film on it, so I can't understand why I didn't pick it earlier, but I'm going to get it now. And it's a great story. A group of prisoners from a Civil War prison camp escape in a giant balloon that was used for observation, and they're dragged thousands of miles across the world and end up on this island that is largely populated with large animals, giant chickens, honeybees, crabs, and they end up having to battle all of those things. And it turns out that Captain Nemo is on this island with the Nautilus, and he's the one doing experiments, continuing to try and improve the world by fixing food supplies and limiting want. But his experiments have, of course, created unintended consequences, as they say.
This movie was a childhood favorite. When I was a kid, our local TV channel used to they had something on at 8 o'clock every night called the Movie, and they would show the same movie Monday through Friday. And for the first 4 days, I only saw the first hour because my bedtime was 9 o'clock. But finally,
on Friday you
I
could
got
stay
to
up.
see the whole thing, and I loved every minute of it. You're right, Herbert Lom isn't quite James Mason, but he is good in the role. And Columbia Pictures did an okay job with their version of the Nautilus. Obviously, they couldn't, they couldn't copy it
exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, it remains a fun film. It's one of my. I still watch it once a year simply because I loved it so much as a child. Good choice.
Well, I'm glad you approve. Like I said, the music is one of those things that pops into my head a lot when I think about the older films, and Forbidden Planet and Mysterious Island both have soundtracks that stick in my mind and make me come back to them over and over again. Tony, do you have something that's sticking into your brain for your number 4 choice?
Well, actually, pretty apt sticking in the brain for this one, since there's parts of mind control and telekinesis in my one. And first of all, I'm choosing one of the classics of British sci-fi, and I'm going to choose Quatermass and the Pit. I knew when I was signing on to this draft, I wanted a Quatermass film on here. It was pretty much all British sci-fi owes its films and TV owes some debt to Quatermass in some way. You go back to the TV version. It's a shame that the original TV version of the Quatermass experiment, most of that is now lost. But and most sci-fi now owes a debt to the series. And I was thinking it was the toss up between whether I go for Experiment or Quatermass in the Pit for my choice here. But think about again, like Bride Frankenstein, going with one, it's my personal favourite, and it's Quatermass in the Pit. Again, this is one that I saw in the cinema. I think it was about 10, 15 years ago now at the Facts Picture House in Liverpool. I do a run of classic sci-fi films. And I think of the character of Quatermass, like as good as like all performances have been, Andrew Carey's the performance that I think of when I think of the character. He has like kind of dignified, risk like attitude that I expect from Quatermass, and is what I feel fits the character best. I mean, some of the designs, like the Martian grasshoppers, haven't quite held up, but there's like a really unsettling quality, especially in the third act when you get more the mind control, telekinesis. That's like really holds up. There's some really, there's like stuff with the like Van London, the grasshopper over the skies of London. That still really holds up both like for sci-fi and horror. And I guess like some of the reactions that a few other people wanted this as well.
I remember seeing this film on television and not understanding what the hell was going on. I was young, so that's my excuse.
That was on my list as well. It's my favorite of the Quatermass movies, and especially the climax. It's like you said, some of the special effects aren't so great, but the image of it's very atmospheric and great use of sound. Maybe the story was even a little provocative for its time, kind of toying with our ideas of creation and evolution, kind of like maybe I'm really stretching here, like a dark variation of 2001. And I like the performances in this one. They're really appropriately low key.
Aaron, it's time for your number 4 pick.
Are these my last two that I have?
No, you get 3. You've got 3 more. You've only gone through 3, so you've got round 4, 5, and 6.
Okay. But because it's snakes, I'm getting this one, then another one, and then it'll come back to me again.
Yes.
So I have one more after.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yes.
I'm gonna go another direction, and Rich, I hope you approve of this choice. I want to choose 1955's "Kiss Me Deadly."
Oh yeah, that works. I understand why that works.
This is one of my favorite noirs. It's what is it? It's a Robert Aldrich film. It features Ralph Meeker as Mike Hammer, one of my favorite noir detective names. I immediately, like, among the films that I had in mind, I immediately thought of this because this is like the Cold War adjacent noir, where like there's literally this quote unquote H-bomb in a box, and the whole film, along with being classic noir as far as shady characters, femme fatale, what have you, it's like a metaphor for the nuclear war. and I was so caught off guard when I saw this. I saw this in college in a film class, and I had no idea what to expect. And so the fact that this movie, about 2/3 of the way through, has a giant jump scare in it in the shape of a box that, like, who knows what's going on inside of it. I was like, that is not where I saw the direction of this movie going. I've watched it many times since. We even have a commentary track for it out there today that I'm very happy with, because this is just great to talk about this movie for 90 minutes. But I find it to be pretty fascinating. Like, and as far as like a noir goes, it's there's many others that I would say are like better as far as representing the genre or what have you, but I find it very entertaining. It has a neat kind of pace to it and a weird sense of, I don't want to say claustrophobic, but like a neat sense of like the world's kind of coming in around Mike Hammer in a way that feels different from other noir, where it's not about the stakes surrounding, I don't know, infidelities or the crime at play or whatnot. It's just more of like the world's closing in on him for different kinds of reasons. Plus, you get some cool stuff in here, like Cloris Leachman in the opening, who, I mean, bad things happen to her, but in terms of like just saying, oh, that's Cloris Leachman. Oh, we're like just off and running. There's a lot of just interesting stuff in that way. Plus, Mike Hammer is such a if this was made like now, it would be like a satirical take of a noir hero. But that's like what Mike Hammer is. Where like all the ladies want him, all the bad guys want to punch him in the face, but he punches them out first. It's like such a like a stereotypical version of a noir hero, and it's very entertaining to watch in this particular version. I know there's other like Mike Hammer films and specific like other Spillane novels that have been adapted, but Kiss Me Deadly is wonderful. Also, the ending rules in this movie. It's such a wild ending to take for how this thing wraps itself up with a kind of almost like The Birds. Like, is it over? Who knows? Like, what's going on? So, Kiss Me Deadly. That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, the ending is the thing that clearly puts this into the science fiction realm. So I think it's an interesting choice that you've made. I like the noir twist that you've got going on it, and like you said, Mike Hammer is a iconic character that gets mixed up in a science fiction plot. Really? That's cool. That's good. So how about your wraparound number
My
5?
wraparound, well, let's see. Since we got one James Whale off the table, I think I'll take another one, but not the one you might be expecting. I'll go with The Invisible Man from 1933. Um, the craziest thing about The Invisible Man there's a lot of things I appreciate about The Invisible Man, but something I really like about The Invisible Man that I think sets it kind of apart from the other monsters. The whole deal with these monsters, right, is that they're sympathetic generally, right? You generally enjoy or can sympathize with them or see where their deal is, except for like maybe Dracula, who just like wants to get laid and have blood. But the Invisible Man is just a bastard. He's just a total jerk. I think he has the highest body count of any of the monsters because he kills a train.
Trainload of people.
So, like his whole deal is just like, I'm the worst guy, and I relish it. I will laugh in the face of others because of how evil I am. I like that somehow, of all the special effects we've had to work with for over a century, invisible is like the easy one to get right, apparently. Like, it always looks good. I love the whole, take the bandages off, and he's just standing there, and he's like got like half a suit on, and will just, be doing his thing. Like, a great job film technology for like nailing invisible early on. Somehow, like, werewolf transformations still kind of suck, except for like 3 examples, but somehow invisible's always been easy, apparently. But this movie, it's got, I think, the most comedy of any of the original Universal monster movies. Also, like, dark comedy, but I think it's by default maybe the funniest one. Except, I guess Bride of Frankenstein's pretty funny. I mean, you mentioned him, Tony. Dr. Pretorius is still a riot. But no, Invisible Man, I'm a big fan of. We don't need to talk about remakes all the time, but I mean, Lee Whannell did a terrific job of updating that character, and for a character we don't have a lot of Invisible Man movies. There's not many. I mean, there's at least like the Wells version of it anyway. There's a lot of invisible stories, but no, yeah, 33 Invisible Man. It's great.
Yeah, this was going to be my next one. I have a lot of affection for the Invisible Man. This was probably the first of the Universal monster movies that I watched like all the way through, at least that I can remember. Yeah, it is darkly funny, and the effects still really hold up. Like when he takes the bandages off and you see them, it's all. I mean, there are some like really goofy bits. So he's like singing "Nuts in May" like, just as a pair of trousers.
Yeah, we talked about this on the draft show back in October, and this is my favorite Universal monster film, and for the reasons that you've just mentioned, it is delightfully deranged, the scientist. It's funny in so many places, and not exactly sympathetic with him, but because you're right, he delights in the horror that he's imposing on other people, but he is a scientist who is just taking a bad turn, so to speak. And there are frequent references to the scientific process that he's working on, and he just kind of gives into the madness. So I had it on my list. Cross off now. I don't get it. Tony, what do you get?
So going from one icon of British sci-fi to another one. The next one I'm taking is Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD.
Okay.
I was considering this one, so yeah.
Yeah, it's like the second of the 2 Peter Cushing Doctor Who films, and yeah, again, it's the second one that I prefer. It's like somewhere he's not kind of one of the classic Doctors, but Peter Cushing really works in the role of the Doctor. Like it's more of like the kind-hearted, like light-hearted, lighter roles that you normally expect from Peter Cushing, but he really plays like the grandfatherly, like humorous, like tinkerer type character very well with the Doctor. But you just see though there's a bit of a little darkness to the character, and you can really see like the intelligence and the manipulation that the Doctor can do. I mean, there's always like kind of example with how Cushing plays his version of the Doctor is like the companions he has both reading like advanced scientific textbooks in the first scene, and Cushing is reading a Biggles comic book, which is a bit of fun. And then it also was like with tying to like the revival of Doctor Who. This is like the first appearance in Doctor Who from Bernard Cribbins, who played Wilfred Mott in the David Tennant era of the show. Well, it's also one where, like, especially considering that, like, it's a remake of the original television serial, The Dalek Invasion of Earth, but, like, considering at the time with the very low budget that Doctor Who had to work with, but it was pretty much just, like, just working with, like, pretty much whatever they can scrape together, mostly barely enough to do any kind of effects. This version being like full color, like, so see all the destruction of London, like the way that's going in this countryside, like full explosions, which color explosions, which BBC definitely couldn't afford to do in the 60s. So really, really impressive. And like there was recently a 4K remaster that Studio Canal did, and a few years ago, before I went to the Electric Cinema in Birmingham, which is unfortunately now closed, and they did a double bill of the Peter Cushing Doctor Who films, and there's a great audience reaction to them, but especially to Dalek's Invasion of 2150 AD. Like, there's a lot of great comedy in here as well, especially from Bernard Cribbins, when he's starting to be one of the Dalek robot servants, and it just playing around with how bulky and cumbersome the Dalek props were. But it doesn't let you forget that the Daleks can still be terrifying. That is a brilliant scene where one of the humans who's aligned himself with the Daleks gives up the Doctor to them. Doctor fully expects it. The Tracer's expecting his reward, and then the Daleks just kill him because he no longer serves his purpose. That's a brilliant scene. And yeah, I think as a good introduction to like this classic era of Doctor Who, I think this is a good like starting point. If you like this one, then you can maybe go back and watch the like original TV series, and it is still just a good bit of fun. Like, and this cuts out all the fat from the original serial. It's just a great bit of fun.
Just out of curiosity, has anybody else seen this film?
No.
Yeah, so I want to say it aired on WGBH in Boston, the PBS channel in Boston, because they used to air the old Doctor Who's like on Saturday evenings before I think it was either before or after they did Lawrence Welk. So I believe that was where I saw it. And yeah, that era of Doctor Who, I always liked it, but I was also a little scared of it. It always kind of freaked me out as well. But yes, it would have been like almost like 35 years since I've last seen it though.
Well, it hasn't been 35 years since I last saw the film that I'm going to choose next. And it's another one, like I said, old movie weirdo here, another one that I got a chance to see at the TCM Film Festival, When Worlds Collide,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I tell you what, it's basically Armageddon, Deep Impact, only it's 40 years before those movies were made, and it takes advantage of miniatures and some pretty great cinematography right up until the end. Then at the end they have a little bit of a letdown because you get to the other planet and it basically looks like a cell from a cartoon movie that they have moved to.
You don't know how other
But that's
planets
okay.
look.
I don't. I haven't been there, so what am I going to do? But I think it does a great job using some disaster sequences early on in the film. Most of it's, though, a film about deciding who gets to ride the Ark to another planet and who gets to live and who gets to die, which I think is an interesting moral question that we're talking about here. We're going to try and save the human race. Who are you going to take, and what are the criteria going to be? And of course, people they get emotionally wrought about that. I can imagine why. And it's a George Pal film also, so we get some of the same kinds of special effects that we had in
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds. Yeah, and like I said, it looks pretty solid, quite good. The miniatures and the photographic effects are convincing right up until the end, and then the cinematography was top notch. John Hoyt is an actor that if you watched a TV show in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, he was in everything. He was the cartoonish bad guy in the wheelchair here. He's like the billionaire industrialist who's trying to buy his way onto the Ark, and he I don't want to give away too much, but there's a comeuppance, and makes everybody happy.
Yeah, he's great in this. You'd be hard pressed to find a movie with a bleaker concept that ends so rosy and hunky dory than this one.
Yeah, well, if you ignore what's happened back where they left, you're great, But
I had wanted to see this movie for the longest time because I just knew the premise, and I love movies like that as far as debating who gets to go, that kind of thing. That's a fun kind of like plot to ride on. And then we mentioned the releases of War of the Worlds. It came with When Worlds Collide. It's like finally I get the chance to watch When Worlds Collide, and it did not disappoint. It's like obviously yes, it has limits as far as being a film from 51, but I still was very satisfied with how it played out to the point where, yes, the ending has its own issues, but I enjoyed how kind of goofy it was to see how things played out once they. I like that we had like more to go on beyond just, and then they left, and they got there. It was fine. I like there was a little extra to go with at the end as well.
And Richard, you'd made comparisons to some of the more modern films with the same basic plot. If I remember correctly, I think Deep Impact began life as a proposed remake of this film.
Yeah,
at one time.
You're right.
And there's still talk of remaking this one, but I haven't heard.
Steven Summers was attached for the longest time to be making a When Worlds Collide remake, but that's going on 20 years now. That's like not happening. But yeah. I know it's always been like out there as an idea to do.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm not waiting. I'm not holding my breath for the next Bond film, and I'm not holding my breath for the remake of When Worlds Collide. Matthew, what are you holding your breath waiting for?
Well, I felt like I had to get some Burt I. Gordon on the list. And
of course.
Yes, when I was trying to figure out which one to go with, I decided to go with Beginning of the End, just because of the Robert Graves factor. And, me growing up in Maine, I remember grasshoppers were in our front yard all the time, and they were kind of fun to, you walk around, they'd be hopping all over the place. And to see them as the baddie is fantastic. But, and the kids often talk about who has a better four-picture arc than so-and-so. I don't know who's better than Burt I. Gordon when you've got Amazing Colossal Man, Beginning of the End, Earth vs. the Spider, and the War of the Colossal Beast, all in a row there. That's, Scorsese eat your heart out there with that one. But I think out of those ones, yeah, Beginning of the End, and of course the MST3K factor, again, I love the sketch where Crow is doing his Peter Graves impression, and it's just essentially scene after scene of him going to, register for classes at the University of Minnesota or whatever it was. So it was just like another... yeah, I again, if Burt I. Gordon is probably one of my favorite directors. I don't know if that maybe says more about me than as a fan of movies, but yeah, this is one of my favorites of his.
Fair enough. Speaking of fair, it's now fair for Dave to choose a film and then your last film as well.
Okay, my fifth one is from 1936. It's called Things to Come. This is a British film directed by William Cameron Menzies, who was best remembered as a production designer, but he did direct as well, including a couple of classic sci-fi films like Invaders from Mars and this one, which is definitely the smarter of the two. The screenplay for this one is credited to H.G. Wells, and it's based on his novel. I don't know how much of his original screenplay remained intact, but it does have a lot of his earmarks all over it. And it tells the story of the end and rebirth of civilization in 3 acts. In the first, the fictional city of Everytown is bombarded into near oblivion during a war, presumably World War III. And this war rages for decades. And Act 2 depicts the aftermath, where Everytown is under the rule of a narcissistic megalomaniac named Rudolph, and he's played by Ralph Richardson, who still believes they're at war. But elsewhere, there's this large group of technically ambitious survivors who formed Wings Over the World, which has forsaken war in order to build a utopia, and they advise Rudolph and Everytown to join them. But Rudolph scoffs at giving up his power and tries to use what's left of his own air force to attack them. Of course, that fails. And the third act largely consists of Wings of the World creating their own utopia, a perfect society unhampered by war. And there's a lengthy montage of the new civilization being constructed that's really, really impressive, considering this film is almost 90 years old. And the third act is definitely where the special effects take over the movie. And kind of like Metropolis. It's just fascinating to look at, this final act. And this group's next will send the ship to the moon. However, there's a strong anti-science, anti-technology movement brewing among some of them, leading to a massive conflict. And in watching this recently, I couldn't help but note how timely that element of the movie is, because you see so many science deniers in positions of power right now being willfully ignorant to technology and the advancements.
Science, it's the enemy of everything that's
it is.
Natural in life.
What has science ever done?
I know. It's the work of the devil. But its commentary on the folly of war and Wells' political leanings aside, it's also it's a pretty entertaining movie, and ultimately it's optimistic. But definitely the special effects in this film are the highlights, for sure. And Criterion put out a Blu-ray that really nicely restores this film. It looks really cool.
Right. I'm going to check this one out for sure.
All right, and your wraparound?
Okay, my wraparound.
Your last choice, because we're only going to do 6.
I know, a lot of mine have been taken, guys. Thank you very much. Okay, my last one is going to be The Day the Earth Caught Fire from 1961.
That was on mine as well.
What's terrifying about The Day the Earth Caught Fire is that its depiction of an impending apocalypse is probably the most plausible, at least the most timely. Not that, I'm worried about multiple atomic explosions sending the Earth spinning towards the sun anytime soon. The real horror of this film lies in how humankind responds to this, or more accurately, doesn't respond to it. As the film begins, there's already ominous signs that all isn't right with the world. There's floods, there's endless rain, there's heat waves, interference in radio communications. But these events are investigated and reported by newspapers, but most people seem to be going about their daily business, and they seem kind of inconvenienced by the climate changes and not really worried about it until things get worse with fires and droughts and cyclones. Eventually, people begin to suspect everything is connected with these nuclear tests, but it might be too little too late. And what it's done is it has shifted the tilt of the Earth, and it's now heading towards the sun. And this realization happens pretty late in the movie, and it's essentially too late to do anything but put their hopes in, a last-ditch plan to try to right the orbit. But it's obvious nobody really thinks it's going to work. I'm not going to say whether or not it does, but in one chilling scene, there's a scene where a whole bunch of people, mostly young people, collectively thrown in the towel and just started partying like it's 1999, wasting what water's left that everyone's been ordered to ration. And the movie doesn't let the viewer off the hook with reassurance that things are going to be great tomorrow. I interpreted a real contempt for human arrogance in this film, and that we're ultimately responsible for our own doom, whether we choose to see the signs or not. And you could easily swap out the sci-fi aspects of this movie for something more immediate, like a climate change or a pandemic, and leave the rest of the story intact, and you'd still have a commentary on people's unwillingness to change. It's a good film. It's pretty bleak, and it's not especially impressive visually, but narratively, it's a fascinating movie. And I love the way it ends.
I think visually, probably the most impressive thing about it is the color grading of it, especially when it gets the prologue and the ending, when Earth gets close to the sun, and it's this really harsh orange used for it.
Mm-hmm.
And look at its stills. Yeah, this looks really interesting. I'm convinced to check this out as well.
Well, Matthew, you're going to give us something to check out?
Yeah, I'm going to go in a completely different direction. So when I was on in early December, we were talking about our Christmas movies. This one just missed the cut. I don't know if people know where I'm going here, but Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. I love the idea of Martians, or I just love the idea of sort of people being on Mars, because obviously it's not a real thing, but kind of that pre what was it, the Mariner ship, when we thought people could still be living on Mars. I always love that idea. The idea of Santa Claus being kind of combined with that. Offbeat Christmas movies always kind of work for me anyway. But yeah, the whole concept of this, it's so kind of bonkers and all over the place. I don't know what my version of a Santa Claus versus Martians would be if I were to make that movie. And I don't know if this movie is exactly what I would go for, but it's so ridiculous that I love it.
And one of the best Mystery Science Theater episodes they ever did.
Yes, I guess that's 3 movies so far that I've picked that were on there. So you can see too where my influences come sometimes for my pre 1968 sci-fi.
You guys probably don't remember the hoopla around Pia Zadora back in the 1980s when her husband tried to turn her into a major star,
I remember
listening
that.
to concerts and putting her in movies and such, and she's one of the kids in this movie. I think I watched this while we were packing to go out on a show tour, like 1970, 71, something like that, and we were going for a weekend, and I my folks were trying to get everything ready, and I just watched it on the TV, and I went, it's okay. It's a little weird, but whatever.
Yeah, it's so amazing. Yeah, like you said, you got Pia Zadora, also Bill McCutcheon, who plays Droppo, who's kind of does all kinds of things. I mean, Mr. Destiny was one of his more one that he did just before he passed away. The Jim Belushi film, but he's kind of Steel Magnolias, right? That's another one he was known for. So it's like kind of fun to see someone like you said, like Pia Zadora or something like that in something like this. And yeah, it's for a Christmas movie, it's definitely not your Hallmark. Though it would be kind of funny to see Hallmark make a movie like this and sort of dress up, British Columbia to look like Mars. That could be an interesting thing. Or maybe you wouldn't have to go to British Columbia, right? You could just use a sound set somewhere and make Mars. But yeah, this one's always kind of a fun one for me.
I'm sure somebody's sitting on the remake rights and just they're holding out for a big time
There
offer, and that's why we're not getting.
There was a rumor that Jim Carrey was going to do one back in the 90s. I remember that, but nothing's ever transpired, obviously.
Yes, you can see there's some lantern-jawed Canadian actors out there who are just ready to don that green paint and play some Martians in a Hallmark remake of this movie.
See, Jim Carrey, he got green paint. He just went a different direction, made the Grinch instead.
That's right.
He just wanted to get green on him.
Yes.
Canadians.
And a Christmas movie.
Exactly.
So there you go.
Canadians.
I'm tempted to go with another visually big budget movie, but I'm going to go with the opposite. I'm going to go with the best movie, I think, from these genres in the 1950s. It's close to being a straight horror film, but because it involves an alien invasion, I'm willing to call it a science fiction film. I'm going to go with Invasion of the Body Snatchers as my last choice. This is a terrific movie. It's got plenty of creepy moments. I like the special effects are interesting. For the 50s, you're getting away with a lot. It's been remade a half dozen times. Some of the other versions are really good. The 1978 version is fantastic.
My favorite one.
And yeah, it's solid. We did this as I think it was a franchise look back, because I know we talked about all of the various versions of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So it must have been an April movie of the month, because we do the franchise look backs on those. And that was just a couple of years ago, and I think it was the first of the films that I did the YouTube video for. So let's just take advantage of that.
We're due for a new one. That's how it works. Every 20 years we get a new Star is Born and a new Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie, and we're due for an Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The last we had was that Nicole Kidman, Daniel Craig masterpiece that came out. So we need another one now. I mean, based on what's happening today, it certainly seems like a lot of aliens are taking over the office. So.
Well, Tony, it's your last choice. So what have you got to add to your list that's going to convince everybody that you have the superior slate of films?
So this one, just are people going to think if I do a short film for my last one?
No, there's good options in there.
Okay, then
I'm okay with that.
Then for my last one, I'm going to go with the film that really set the groundwork for sci-fi, and easily the oldest film that I'll have in there. I'm going to go for A Trip to the Moon.
Obviously, yes, great.
Yeah. I mean, going for what helped codify a lot of the sci-fi. Again, a lot of sci-fi films, you wouldn't probably sci-fi is a problem genre, wouldn't exist the way it does say without A Trip to the Moon. it's one of the most iconic sci-fi films ever made. Georges Méliès's work here is spectacular considering what the resources would have been available in 1902.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was familiarity with it, like there's a lot of parodies and references to like particularly the like cannon shots in the eye of the moon that you see all over the place. I think Futurama was the one that I first remember. At least I probably didn't know it was a reference to a trip to the moon at the time, but it's where I got that one. It's one that's been always in the background for me. I was aware of. Probably watched it again for the first time after Martin Scorsese's Hugo came out. With Georges Méliès is the most prominent supporting character of the film, and actually, when I watched Hugo and seeing the colorized version of A Trip to the Moon with the hand painted film reel, hand colorized version of it that Scorsese used in Hugo. That was incredible to see it on a cinema screen. And I've got the Blu-ray set that Arrow put out for it. So I've not been able to get around to watching it yet, but I'm real forward to just going back and watching it. There's this distinct charm that you get with this like classic era of silent film when you see people start to figure out what can and can't be done with film cameras. And especially with Méliès's background as a magician, you can see his really willingness to push what can be done with these early cameras. And really all of the stuff use of jump cuts, the sets, the costumes, all stuff that even like other sci-fi films of the time, or just other films of the time, weren't doing what Méliès did with A Trip to the Moon. And I think it was really only with Metropolis in 1927 that you got another sci-fi film as iconic as A Trip to the Moon.
Well, it's definitely iconic, and everybody knows some of those images. Like you said, the bullet in the eye of the moon is. I see that anytime somebody starts talking about film history, you're going to get that shot.
For sure.
I don't know about the Arrow version, but the Flicker Alley Blu-ray that was released here in America about 6 years ago is a really neat set. It has like 3 or 4 different versions of the film, each with a different score. Some more modern and synthesized sounding, and it's really interesting watching the film, in different ways with different scores.
Yeah, and I just remember when I was at university, that's when I was at University's Film Society, I did like a silent film double bill. I can't remember what the second one that was shown was, and I have a feeling it's like one of the classic silent comedies or a drama, like maybe a Chaplin or a Keaton. But one of the ones shown was A Trip to the Moon, and it, seeing it with like students like for or something, and you just see how, especially with an audience, you can see just the power that A Trip to the Moon still has.
Well, the length of our discussion is just about long enough to include the whole movie in the video. Well, Aaron, you started us off. You get to finish.
All right. Well, I'm impressed with the number of things left over for me. I've gotten pretty much everything I wanted on my list here. So
glad someone did.
Sad trombone. I am going to. Well, what can I do? I know what I can do. And I could go this direction as far as I mentioned Godzilla. And it's like, well, there's so many to choose from, so I can stick with that. And I will, but I'll go in a slightly different direction because I'm going to go with The War of the Gargantuas from 1966. I have, in fact, a top 10 list of why War of the Gargantuas rules that I made for another podcast like 4 years ago. So I'm going to read that right now. It's one of the best Frankenstein films as a quasi-sequel to Frankenstein versus Baragon, or Frankenstein Conquers the World, I think is the American version. You get 2 for the price of 1 because there are 2 Gargantuas, and I'm always good for a BOGO. It's from director Ashiro Honda, once again, from the director of Godzilla, meaning that it has a certain kind of quality that I respect when it comes to kaiju films from Japan. The monster fights are awesome in this movie because you have, again, 2 giant Frankensteins fighting each other. It features Oscar nominee Russ Tamblyn as the American star, and he's grumpier than Harrison Ford on his best day, which I'm always happy to see. The film very much embraces its wackiness. It's a very wacky movie about these giant monster things and that, doing their thing. It's a perfect gateway film to more kaiju movies. This is a great one to be like, if you watch this, you're like, I want to see more of what this kind of thing has to offer. I think this movie is a perfect way to explore that genre. But Del Toro, Burton, Tarantino, and Nick Cage are all huge fans of this movie, and according to Brad Pitt, it inspired him to act because he watched War of the Gargantulas at a young age. The movie is just over 80 minutes, so it's a quick watch. Not as quick as A Trip to the Moon, perhaps, but it's still a quick watch. And it's in HD right now on Max. You can watch this right this second and be happy because you just put on War of the Gargantulas, a movie that I think rules. So those are my top 10 reasons of why War of the Gargantulas is gonna finish off my list here.
Oh, I remember seeing it for the first time in a drive-in. It was the second feature when we were seeing Help.
Help? That's quite the combination.
Drive-in combinations never had to make any sense. They just had to get families in there because, we're selling the Friday and Saturday night.
I know it's a double bill of one of the other films I was potentially going to pick, which is Invasion of Astro Monster, one of the Godzilla films, which makes a lot of sense to me. But Help, yeah, sure.
A little wild. The Rosemead Drive-In on Rosemead Boulevard down there in California. That's where I saw it. Oh. So there we have it, folks. We've got 30 films for you to peruse, but pay attention to the slots that they fit into because everybody has a different set of films. Matthew's got, he's got a theme that he's going with. He's sticking with the one that works best for his own podcast and blog site. So I appreciate the effort that he put into that at the last minute. Huzzahs to you. That's great. Dave's disappointed because we stole all the movies that he wanted.
You're all going to burn.
Aaron's happy he got Godzilla and he gets to add War of the Gargantuas at the end. Tony has picked Plan 9 from Outer Space, Quatermass in the Pit, and the Daleks Invasions. I'm not exactly sure that those will be three films that are going to get him a lot of support for his choices, but he's got some good films on his list also, so we'll see how that works. And clearly I have the best list of all, so everybody should be choosing that. We're going to take a quick break here to hear from a fellow Lamb Podcasting Network show, and then we're going to come back for our plugs for the week.
Hey, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Abe.
And together we host
Out Now with Aaron and Abe.
Hey, we pulled that off.
Hey.
This is a weekly review show, right? We talk about movies on a weekly basis.
And other things.
Yeah, we have commentary tracks. We have lots of guests.
A lot of bonus episodes. A lot of game talk. A lot of sports talk.
Yeah, somehow sports talk factors in there along with Simpsons references for whatever reason.
So give us a listen. We're everywhere podcasts are found.
Yeah, they're everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
Out Now with Aaron and Abe.
Coming live.
Sometimes? I think it's in there. I can edit that together.
We're back, and it's time to hear what all of our guests have to promote. We want to make sure that they get a chance to share things that they think our audience might be interested in. Dave, you had to go last in the draft. I'm going to let you go first in the promos. Have you got something at the Free Kittens Movie Guide or something else that you want to share with us?
Yeah, a reference book that I've contributed to has just been published, edited by Vanessa Morgan, who's an author. It's called Meow, Cats in Horror, Sci-Fi, and Fantasy Movies. It's available in paperback and on Kindle at Amazon. And it's a pretty comprehensive collection of films that prominently feature cats. And I contributed a few of the essays to this.
All right.
I like it. There's a link on Amazon I'll put into the show notes because I want to make sure that people get a chance to find it.
Okay.
Excellent. Matthew, last minute entry. You got something that everybody could look at or see or listen to, something that shows off your talent and ability somewhere.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's where you can find the direct to video connoisseur site, links to the podcast, DTVC podcast as well, and then my most recent book, Nadia and Aiden, is available on Kindle Unlimited, and in paperback as well. Links on the site for that is well there too. It's not direct-to-video kind of stuff. It's more, literary fiction. But yeah, I always appreciate someone who wants to pick up one of my books as well.
Good deal. and we're doing like a sales force here this week. Tony, you probably don't have anything to sell, but I'm sure you have something that people want to see or listen to.
So yeah, as usual, still plugging my podcast, going through the original version of The Wicker Man. Just search Wicker Man podcast wherever you find it. Over on my site, whose views did reviews recently for Hard Truths and Nickel Boys, and I'm hoping to get a review of Memoir of a Snail up soon. And tying in with this podcast, I was a guest recently on Bubbleweed's It's Time to Be On Red Who podcast, talking about the Doctor Who episode Remembrance of the Daleks with Sylvester McCoy.
And Aaron, I'm not sure we have time to listen to all the things that you've got to promote.
I'll be quick because I got to get to the main one that I want to promote. But first up, Out Now with Aaron and Abe. That's the main podcast I host with my friend Abe. We talk about weekly movie releases, and we do a lot of other bonus fun stuff. Everything I do ends up on my Substack page, thecodeofzeke.substack.com. That includes all my movie reviews from We Live Entertainment. I'm on all the socials at Aaron's PS4. And the main thing now that got me so excited when you reminded me that this podcast was happening this week, making it almost kismet. I have a new podcast launching in March with my friend Terrence Johnson, my friend and film critic Terrence Johnson. We are both black film critics. I'm a big Godzilla fan, as noted on this podcast. Terrence is less of a Godzilla fan, but interested. And so we are forming a Godzilla podcast called Two Black Guys Talk Godzilla. It's arriving in March. Every episode is going to be covering a movie, one of the films in the Godzilla franchise. Will be going in chronological order. It'll be a bi-weekly series. And yeah, you can follow. We've set up all the socials now, so you can follow us on Instagram at Two Black Guys Talk Godzilla. And because it's too many characters for Twitter and Blue Sky, it's at BLK Godzilla Talk. So Black Godzilla Talk on all that. The Two Black Guys Talk Godzilla coming very soon. We are very excited to start this podcast.
Excellent. And on my site, just the usual. If I've seen something in a theater, I usually post a review of it. So you've got comments up on Love Hurts, which you can skip entirely, and Heart Eyes, which you should also skip entirely.
Rules. Great movie.
And Captain America: Brave New World, which is only for completists. It's not necessary, but that's just my opinion. You don't have to listen to me, but I do appreciate when you come by and pay attention for a few minutes. I want to thank everybody once again for joining us this week, especially Matthew, who joined us not only at the last minute, but after we'd gotten started, but he did a great job coming up with things to talk about. No one would have believed in the middle of the 20th century that human affairs were being watched keenly and closely by intelligence greater than our own. Yet across the gulf of the internet, on the podcast of the Lambcast, intellects vast, cool, and unsympathetic regarded our episode with envious eyes and slowly and surely joined their plans against us. Vote for my slate, folks. Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.